Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Decryption and I hope you are well. I took part in the Ludum Dare 55th Game Jam event where I had to create a game based on the theme summoning. I had 72 hours to make the game and then put it online basically, and I made a pretty damn good game if I do say so myself. But the last Game Jam I did, I produced a devlog, not my progress of making it, but showing all the bits in the game and how they worked. It actually went really popular and people really enjoyed it, so for my next Game Jam, here we are again. Just like last time, we're going to have a brief overview of the bits in the game, but if there is anything you would like me to focus down more, make a dedicated tutorial, please let me know in the comments. So let's get started. So this is the game I made. It's called King Summoning Man. Since the theme was summoning, and I was just like, everyone's going to do dungeon crawlers with waves of enemies, blah, blah, blah. So I went a completely different route, and I did summoning medieval style, where the king would, say to somebody, summon this man to my chambers kind of thing. And that's the route I decided to go with it. So you have this city here, basically, and your task is to run around, find the target, and bring it back to the king. The king will summon them, and then you bring them back. That's basically it. I had an idea at the very start that kind of kicked it all off, and that was the card selection screen. So this is the card select screen, which is one of the first things that you see when you come into the game. It basically, I wanted the ability to apply modifiers to the game to change how the world works. I don't know where this idea came from, I just thought it was cool. But you can come across and you literally just pick a card, and you can pick up to 3 at the moment. I wanted to add more cards, but in the end I couldn't. I ran out of time basically because the cards took a while to build in. And rather weirdly, I built the card before I built the game, which is a big no-no to games design. Don't focus on one tiny feature and then we put the game around it. But yeah, so the card system is dead simple. So if we have a look at the UI, so I pretty much have the card select screen here, where it's got a sub-component, which is a card select panel, and it's using the new common animated switcher, part of the common UI pack, and it basically allows for this very nice card switching here. So it animates. If you have more, it can carry on and go down. And all this does is, it's just a big button thing that when you click it, it adds it down to here, and when you click summon, it stores the cards in your game instantly. These cards, I pretty much store in a data table that I built called card data, and it's got all the card different things into it. So you've got like skeleton crew, it says what that card does. So in this case, it's skeletons invade the kingdom, avoid them or die. All it does is spawn this blueprint in the world, and I've got this spawn per event like here. If I jump back into my city map, you'll see I have a bunch of events dotted around these little blueprints here. So there's one up there, there's one, and it's dotted around all the different bits in the pack. And these are the events. And when my game first loads, it will find all of these events, find all of the active cards, and if the spawn per event is ticked, it will randomly spawn all of those spawn per event ones into these. So it'll loop over and say 50-50 chance is it going to put it here, 50-50 chance it's going to put it there, and it'll do that for all of them. And then it'll do all of the other cards that support that. So cartography as well is another one where it spawns random carts to block your passages so you can't get through. So if you think you can just run up here and find your target there, for example, you can't, because there'll be a cart there and there might be a cart blocked here as well, so you'll have to go the long way around. And it just adds little modifiers to the game like that. And that's what this spawn per event does. And then the blueprint is literally what controls it. They're all based off of this BPA card effects to build it up, but they're all just here and they do random things. So the cartography one here is literally just a blueprint with a box blocker to block them getting in, and then the event graph, which literally comes in and says on play, randomize the static meshes. This one's dead easy, it literally just blocks it off. Same with the skeleton one. It's the other cards which get quite funky. So like the plushy haven, and I wanted to be near the doors of the houses, so I didn't want it to be in the middle of the road. So for this one it's slightly different because it doesn't spawn per event, but if I look at the blueprint, this one gets all of the houses, randomizes over them, and then this one gets all the random houses, then it'll randomize to show whether it should show one of these random event things inside a house. I did it as a random event lock 1 and 2 because then the plan was to have more cards later, like pumpkins and stuff. So that's pretty much how the card selection bit works, and all it is plugging these and making them work. So like the overindulgence one, it's not a spawn per event, it only spawns once, and all it does is tell the NPC that they're drunk. That's it. But what I do is in the NPC's AI, I will look over, are you currently at drunk speed? If you are, change how you walk, and that'll make them walk slowly and do everything they need. The plan was to eventually make them start, throw up a bit because they're sick, but I'm out of time for that one. So anybody who's used Unreal for a while will know I've done this a really weird way, and yes, it fully works, and I can continue adding loads of cards, plug it all in how I want. I can go and get the Jester's hat, which makes people randomly laugh. This does absolutely nothing, but the game searches if this exists when AI tries to attack you, and there's 50-50 chance that they might laugh at you. Fine. But this is what an ability system is for. So Unreal's gameplay ability system, this is exactly what this would be perfect for, because each one of these cards could just be an ability in the world. When the ability activates, you can just spawn the skeletons if you want, or add a gameplay tag of the Jester's hat exists, all sorts of stuff like that. But I don't have a lot of knowledge with a gas system, and the times I have used it, I've always ended up running into a block of knowledge that took a long time to solve, just because I'm still learning it at the moment, that I didn't want to do that on a game jam where I've got a limited time. So I avoided it for now, but this should have absolutely have gone through the gas system. There are other bits on here as well, like the card sound, which is when you select the card. The card type is just an enum I created, the card difficulty levels. It doesn't really affect anything except the card generation here. So if I open up this card select panel, this is just a sub panel with the buttons on and the cards. Then if I open the card up, you've got the card here, and all those data attributes do is change this. So here I've got an overlay of the select card. So I've got a card image here with a scale box which changes that. I've got the backing of the card, and it literally just randomizes whether it's red, green, or yellow. And then the title and description. And then for the times you have selected it, you have selected this, which is just an overlay which disables the button. And then you've got a no more space. So if you've had 3 cards, that's pretty much it. The card selection part is relatively simple, but the newest thing I did was the animated switcher, which is very, very nice. And then adding the cards when you click them just pushes it down to here using a series of events in the back end, and it works really, really nicely. So that's the card selection screen. The next bit I'll look at, which was a really cool feature, you'll notice that half of these houses are floating. Not all of them, but some. The ones which are on the floor are static houses. They are individual components. That's what just came with the asset pack. That's fine. But the ones which are floating are the randomized houses that I've got in my game. So if I open this up here, just like I've done in most jams, and I've done a few tutorials on randomizing how a house looks and works, this is a little bit different because I was almost procedurally generating houses, but I wasn't, because I was just changing them. I could look into procedurally generating them, but again, I had 72 hours to try and figure it out. So I took a shortcut where I put every single aspect a house can have into one big block. Sometimes it doesn't even make sense, like this here. It just physically can't happen. But I did it anyway, and then I randomized every single bit of what needs to happen, including the random locations down here, which is where the plushies would spawn, or the crates, or something like that. But the difference between this one and, say, how you'd normally randomize an NPC where you give them a hat, you don't give them a hat. This builds on layers. So if I come into the randomize function here, you'll see I have a bunch of things where it just randomizes different aspects, but you'll start to see it branches off. So here, I'm spawning the door frame. If I spawn a door frame, then I can spawn a roof over the door frame, which is here. And if I don't spawn that, then I shouldn't be spawning this door frame small here, because if I get rid of this, that can't just be floating there. That makes no sense. So it will only spawn if this door frame is available. And that's what these little checks here do. So it comes in and it'll say, if I spawn a door frame, you've got a chance of spawning the small roof over it. And then it'll continue on, and it'll do it a few times as well, like a rooftop small. So am I spawning one of these here at the top? If I don't, then I don't need to spawn that. It'll just remove it outright. And that's what it does. It's basically the randomization thing I always do, but on steroids at this point, as it randomly checks. It was a lot of copying and pasting, sure, but for quickness, I can just come here, pick any random house, or in my case, all of the houses, and I can just sit hitting the randomize button, and just every single house is there. I roughly calculated it based on all of the different meshes I got, that I've got 1.6 million variations of houses with all the different aspects I've got. And just to define what a variation is, if we take this exact house and hide that window, that's 2 variations. If we change that window to a different mesh, that's another variation. So they can add up. Then you've got all the materials on top of it as well. So if I come back to my data tables, random house data, you can see here I have all the different elements available to it. So we have 4 different doors, 8 foundations, which is the base of the house at the bottom. We have 2 round rooms which sit on either side, 3 roof windows, 7 rooftop, blah 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 blah, and it keeps going on, and you've got all the different things down here. We've even got random door items, but even better, half of them have a chance of spawning, a random chance out of 1. So 60% of the time it will spawn a window, other times it won't. So we have a lot of different variations here, and I can just keep clicking random, and keep going and going and going, and it'll just give me completely random houses each time. And it's not that bad on performance, to be honest, and that's how I managed to generate all of this. I did spend a chunk of time remodeling this. If anybody's seen the Cinti asset pack before, it starts here, it comes up, and I think that's your house. You have this crossroad here, you have a bit here, you have a bit up here, and that's it. And I've massively expanded it out, drawn loads of new paths into it, copied and pasted all the actors, and put everything in. And that's how I got this massive landscape that I've done. So if I were to come and select all the random houses as well, I've got all the houses, I've currently got 57 houses. I could just tap randomize and it barely freezes it because it's just going over every single house. So you can completely change it around. In the future, I'd absolutely look at generating the paths as well, so we can change all the paths around it, because that'd be quite unique. But that's the house regeneration. So the reason they're floating is for the nav meshes. So you can see I have one massive nav mesh here. But if I put this house down on the floor like so, you see it's took out the block for the nav mesh. Perfect. It's put a block here so the AI will avoid it, they won't walk through it. If I click randomize, it doesn't update. Everything is still there from the last nav mesh that was there. So in Unreal, typically once you generate a nav mesh, it's static. But there is an option where you can go and enable it to be dynamic, or dynamic with a modifier. Dynamic means it will always refresh, I believe, but that takes a lot of performance power to actually make it run, so I didn't want to go down that route. Whereas now that my nav mesh has just generated it, it's updated it. And my nav mesh will randomly generate sometimes, but not all the time. So the way I went through it was the nav mesh modifier, which is a component you can add to any actor, and reading the documentation of it, it says when it is spawned or destroyed, then the nav mesh around it will update around here, which is okay, except my houses aren't spawning or being destroyed. They exist and they're changing. I wanted the randomization to change while you're playing the game. So you come out of the level, come back in, and it's a completely different map. If you play the game a bunch, the houses will be different all the time. So how could I achieve that where the nav meshes were generating at runtime? And that's where my issues will come. So what I figured out is it will also trigger the spawn aspect of the regeneration if something lands on it, because that's all a spawn is, something appearing onto the nav mesh. So all I do on event begin play is I randomize my house, so just, randomize it, and then I set the Z axis to 0, and then it forces the nav mesh to update across everything. So you'll see normally if I were to regenerate a nav mesh, it would regenerate everything. Whereas with this one, it only regenerates the tile around it, which is the red thing you can see there, which is why it's absolutely perfect for this. All of these lampshades and stuff, yeah, they're not going to regenerate, and the static buildings, but the buildings floating, I just put it down to 0 and it regenerates. It's quite a nice little technique. I could have gone through and added blueprints saying spawn a house here, spawn a house here, spawn a house here, but then wouldn't have had any artistic vision of where the houses were, how big they were. So this is why I opted to do this way. So I made all of the houses on the floor, put them where I needed to, then just raised them up, and that's how I got the randomness of the village. So the next thing we'll look at in here is all of these weird green lines and the cubes with arrows. What are all of these? So this is my patrol points, basically. I didn't want a game where just randomly people would go to a random point, then you'd see them, they'd turn around, then they'd come back on themselves, or they'd walk into a wall and just sit staring at it for some reason. It's a busy, bustling city full of NPCs. So you can see all the different NPCs walking around, and they are stopping at some points, but as it stands, they are walking around the city like they've got a purpose, which is what I wanted. Normally, I'd go for NPCs in AI where they physically have a purpose, so they'll go to the butcher's, they'll pick a parcel up, they'll go somewhere else, they'll drop it off, just to really sell it, but I had 72 hours. So how do I trick that and make people think it? Patrol point. So all of these green lines that you see around here are different patrol paths that I've created. The red lines are patrol paths that join to one another, which we'll take a look at in a minute. So an AI will randomly spawn around the map, and I've placed some of these purple nodes here, which is an NPC spawn point. So if I come into all of these and just set the scale to something like 5, you can see all the patrol points where the AI will spawn. So all I do is simply get all of those actors at the start of the game, spawn an NPC there, wait for a moment, spawn all NPCs again until I've got my number, and I think I've got something like 250 NPCs walking around, which is really impressive. Then I will get, every time I spawn an NPC, the nearest patrol point. So for example, if I spawn an NPC on this purple cube, the nearest one will be this one right here. So it will connect to this, it will get the parent of this, which is this here, which just controls the parents of the patrol points, so we've got a way to combine them so they know where to go. They also draw these green splines automatically in the construction script, which we'll look at. But then it just basically says follow it. So it'll follow down to here, and it'll just keep following, not the green lines, because as you can see it goes through the wall, but it'll walk from this point, it'll get the next point, which will be this one, and the next point will be that one. And that leads us on to the red markers. The red markers are how I add some more randomness into the game, because if I had an NPC following this single spline point, they'd just be going around the same path over and over again, over and over, and following the same loop around the city. So to add some randomness, the odd points in a patrol path will join to another patrol path, and that's how I can now get them. When they come here, it will run based on the random patrol path chance, which is in this case 50%, to whether it carries on its normal path or it changes over to this new patrol path, and it will cross the road and carry on down a brand new path. Sometimes you can come down, it will run all the way around, and then it'll get to this one and it'll say, oh, do I want to do it again? And it'll come over here, it'll randomly pick a direction it wants to go, either backwards or forwards, and it'll walk down here. There are some very odd glitches, like for some reason this one here, see, if you run the game for like 5-10 minutes or something, eventually all the NPCs will arrive at this point because it's a critical point of the patrols, that's fine, but they'll get stuck, like they can never reach it. There's no reason I've looked at to why they can't reach it, because as you can see, they can arrive to it. I thought it might be in the house, but it's nowhere near it. They just arrive here and don't know where to go, even though it's marked up that they can go that way or that way. It's something I never put enough time to figure out, but it does work overall. So the patrol parents thing, if I come and have a look at this, all it does is store an array in the correct order that they need to go. I was toying with this at the start, and in future, I don't think I'd actually have a parent node. I think what I'd do is just let every single node take care of itself. Because the parent nodes are okay, and it keeps them all together, but it's just a pain in the butt to manage, because you have to select all your nodes, then you have to select it into the array. I ended up writing an editor utility script, so I can right-click on it and tell all the arrays to add to it, but it's just annoying. So in future, I might just say this one links to this one, and this one links back to this one. Maybe. Something like that, I don't know. But something nicer than just having the parents decide it. Because, for example, like when I get to here and I've got a crossing point, I can't just say go to this crossing point, because I need to find the parent of it, so I need to loop over every parent, then I need to loop over every single parent's control points to find the correct one, so I know which one to map them to. It's just a lot of disadvantages to doing it with parent items. But the parents, anyway, the way the splines work is relatively simple. Because all it does in the construction script is clear the splines off, loop over all the patrol points you've added, and create a spline to follow it. That's it. That's all it does. And it just follows all the way down here. In the game, these splines aren't rendered. It's literally just a dev tool. So if I press G, you can see it disappears. So that's what the game view sees. It's not rendered. It's just for the editor. But it's really nice because then it means I can zoom up like I did, and you can see all the places the NPCs can walk. So you can see there's very limited, like this path here and here, where the NPCs don't walk. But because they're walking up here, you never really see it, so it doesn't matter. And then you can see all the connections and everything. So it sells the game. And you've even got a unique one here where this one links to this one and this one links to this one. So you've got a little crossing point where multiple paths join up, which is cool. So the next thing we'll take a look at is the AI. I've actually got two versions of AI in this game. The first thing I've got is our blueprint tree, which controls the NPCs randomly walking around. So all it does is a selector, which basically says pick one of these conditions. The first one it picks, go through this one. So the first one it does down here is location overriding my AI is how I tell the NPCs to follow the player. So everyone except the enemies uses this script. So the NPCs or your subject that you need to go and find. And if the location override is set, then it can mean one of two things. Either the player's told you to follow me, so because you're the subject. So this location override is basically one thing, and that's the plushies, basically. So when the game starts, the plushies will randomly spawn next to some houses, and then if the NPC walks into the sphere radius of it, it rolls a random dice to whether or not they should go and laugh at it. If it rolls true that they should go and laugh at it, it sets this location override, where they move to it, they laugh. After they finish laughing, it removes the location override, comes back to the top, and goes to the next two sides. That's pretty much it. So if the player isn't found, then it calls patrol, where everybody will basically just follow the green splines. And then if the player is found, then it just simply says keep going to the player. That's it. But the benefit of this is if you're a subject and the player has found you and said come with me, if the location override gets set, then the subject will also go and follow them. So part of the plushie card is the random plushies are there, people will go and laugh at it, including your subject. Meaning you could be walking your subject home to the gate to get out and, succeed the mission, and they'll just randomly wander off and start laughing at a plushie. They'll have to wait for them, basically. It's quite fun. The plan was to go and eventually and the player can be like, oh no, seriously, keep following me, and it'd disable this, but I ran out of time for that one. And that's the basic behavior tree that controls 90% of the AI in here. You might be wondering why the enemies don't use this, and the enemies I wanted more complicated logic for. So the logic I wanted for the enemies, and I could have absolutely have done this with the behavior trees, but since I've started getting more into the state trees, I use them. So I wanted the skeletons to spawn, or the enemies, in their set locations, and not move when they see the player until the player reaches a certain distance. So if they are at this lamppost, for example, the player could be stood here, and they'll be fully aware of the player. So they start taunting him, and like stretching their muscles, all Zelda style. And then as you get closer, then you're in attack range, so the enemies will run up to you. They'll start trying to swing for you. You can dodge them. You can't attack in this game, so you can only run away, which is how I wanted it. And then if you get too far away, then the skeletons will give up with you and walk back. The caveat of this is if you're wearing the jester hat, then they need to randomly roll a dice to whether or not they also run up to you and then laugh at you and then walk away. So there was quite a lot of moving parts. All of that logic is binary logic. Should they laugh at you? Yes or no. Should they run to you? Yes or no. Should they taunt you? Yes or no. So that's why I felt the state tree, which is very good at blending between things, wasn't for this. It was better as a state tree. Whereas these ones here, yeah, I could have done them as a state tree, but I just wanted to get this over and done with something I was confident quick, because the enemies were a last addition. So the state tree I've set up for them here is called the ST skeleton, because I was going to add more steps. And there's all the different options they take. So you can see right at the top, it comes straight in and it says check the player's distance. And then the condition here says, is the player's distance greater than 2000? If it is, then they will move back to their starting location, which is a variable that I keep in the evaluator here. So when I find the player, I get the player's position, whether they're alive and whether they have the jester hat. And then the find skeleton location, which is the evaluator to pick up the NPC's details, gets the current skeleton and the location of them. So this simply returns back. So if they're too far away, return home. Then next it checks if the player's died and then returns home. And then it checks if the player's invisible or have they like hidden behind a building or something. Then it returns home. Now you might turn around and say, you've done the same action 3 times. Why not just add them all into the same state? And you are right. And the reason I've had to do it as 3 separate ones is because the system just kept glitching. It wouldn't work because you can absolutely add multiple if conditions and then you can set whether it's an or and an and. I don't know if it's the current version of Unreal or because I was tired from doing the game, but it just wouldn't work. It wasn't reliable. It'd just ignore it. The same was with sub conditions like this. So I've got go to player, attacher. If I had another sub condition, Unreal would just outright ignore the conditions on it and take the path. I don't know why. I know state trees are brand new. It seems like a glaring oversight, but the only way I could do it was top level condition checks, singular only, which sucks, but at least I could achieve what I want. So that's why I've had to do it that way. Hopefully in future, this will just turn into one state node. But then after all of this anyway, it comes down and it checks whether it should laugh or the player. If it does, it'll move to the player, then it'll laugh at them. Otherwise, it'll move to the player, then it'll start trying to attack them. Because the ands work perfectly. It's just the ors which don't work. So you can see I've got it up here as well. It'll move to them, attack, wait for a random amount of time, then attack them just so it's not OP. And then it tries to follow the player again to taunt them if it needs to, and then goes back. That's why I've got 2 of the same go to player nodes here, because I just couldn't make it work otherwise. But that's pretty much the skeleton state tree as it stands. Relatively simple. The skeleton stands there. If they're supposed to laugh at the player and the player's in distance, run up, laugh at them. If they aren't supposed to laugh, then run up to the player and attack them. Or if the player's too far away, then taunt them. That's pretty much it. And you saw when I played the game, you saw every so often when I find skeletons, you see I've got red line tracers following me. And now he's running up to me. What's he going to do? He's going to attack me. So he's trying to attack me. And he'll keep following me until I get too far away, where he'll get bored and he should return home after taunting me. And there you go. You can see he is now returning back to his starting position. And that's the basic AI in the game. I have a behavior tree to control the dead basic stuff and a state tree to control the more logic-filled attacking part. So the subject spawning section, that part works based on the game instance that I have. So in my Misc folder, I have my game instance here, and I pretty much store the active card effects, which are the card effects that it needs to spawn in the world that you pick from the card selector screen. The subject, which is whatever the dialogue sets it to be, which we'll look at shortly. The current act that the king needs to play, so the dialogue. And I have a map called the King's Chambers, and all it is a static map where you can't even move around it. It's literally just this here, which I got from another Cinti pack. I touched it up a little, moved some bits around. I cut off the vast majority of it because it just frankly wasn't needed. It was a huge dungeon. And for the King's Chambers, it just seems to be a little room like. I placed some characters to sell it, placed the king here, and that's all this does. The player's there, that's what the player looks like if you didn't know. And then all it does is execute some narrative dialogue. That's it. Super simple. If I come into my dialogue here, you've got the king's different acts just to separate it a bit nicer. So when you first come in, the game instance is set to the first king act, and that'll play this dialogue here, where it'll come down, shout some stuff about the royal summoner, blah blah blah, and then right at the end, then it starts the quest where you have to capture the first guy, Algar, and then it sets the open level right there. Oh, and then it opens the next level, which is the card select screen. So the game goes from the main menu to the King's Chambers, to the card select screen, to the game, back to the King's Chambers, card select screen, game, and that's the loop until you get to the credits, which is the final one. So you can see the differences with on this one. You come down, you open the level, that's all good. And then if you come to Algar's dialogue, it's the exact same, depending on whether the exact same where it comes through and you talk to him. But the benefit of the subjects cards is they will try to react depending on what cards you've selected in the world. So if you've selected cartography, so carts randomly spawn, and if they're drunk, then they will repeat some lines in drunk style. So I've actually got the AI to speak out in a drunk style, and they'll hiccup at the end, and they'll say about how the carts are in the city. If they're not drunk, then they'll do the same thing about the carts. Otherwise, they'll just randomly affect. So the dialogue physically changes depending what cards you select in the game. I would have loved to set on this feature way more. Like if the skeletons of the game going, how will we get past the skeletons? Or even randomize it between the carts and the skeletons if you've got both. If you've got the jester hat, they laugh at you and say, yeah, sure thing, whatever, jester. Something like that. But I just ran out of time at the end. But you'll see they've all got the same events on it, where it comes in, it sets the AI to say, follow the player. It then comes in and tells the NPC to run unless they're drunk, because you can't run if you're a drunk NPC. And then it starts the dialogue of Summoner Thoughts where the player just basically says to himself, I need to take them to the king now, kind of thing. And that's pretty much the game line. The only other thing missing from it is the quest. So I have the quest for each subject, and all this quest handles is when you find them, it sets the current King's Act to the next one. So you start the game, this one here, it begins the quest of Al Gore. You find Al Gore here, which completes as soon as you complete one of these lines down here. And then it changes the King's State to Act 2, which is the next one. So as soon as you reach the gates, the subject is done. It comes in, plays the next quest, which is what will be Tatium, sets the subject. So that will be this NPC subject here, which is a primary data asset, just throwing some basic dialogue about them. And that's it. Super, super simple game loop. If I manage to get through it quicker and not spend as much time level designing as I did at the start, I was planning to add more cards, randomize the order and stuff like that, but I just simply ran out of time, unfortunately. The way you return the subject home is you come over and there's this little blueprint right here called Target Delivery. And all this is a trigger with some fancy logic on it. So you can see when I come in and I overlap it, it checks if the overlap actor is the player. If it is, it sets the player as arrived and plays the dialogue and calls the play dialogue function, which we'll look in a moment. If it's not the player, then it checks if it's an NPC and they've got the tag of subject, which is how I differentiate if it's a random NPC or the subject. And if it is, then it marks the NPC as arrived and calls play dialogue as well. So both of them call play dialogue. But what also happens is once you leave it, it detects if it's the player or the NPC and unmarks their booleans like so. So you know if one's there or not. You've both got to arrive at the gates for the guards to open the gate and let you back in. So down here we've got the play dialogue node, and it says if just the player has arrived and the NPC hasn't, then it gets the NPC and judges their distance. If they're more than 1,000 away, then it will play the gates knights saying, ha ha ha, you don't have a subject, you don't know what you're doing, kind of thing. And then the narrator, which I've built into it, will also come on and just give you a very helpful hint saying, if the guards can't see the subject, then I'm going to let you back into the kingdom. And the reason I say if they can't see it is because down here, if it's less than 1,000, meaning they're coming up, then they don't say anything because they can see the subject's coming. And then the only other thing it does is once the subject arrives at it, it will come here, it will flag it up as true, play the delivery, then down here it will say if both characters have arrived, then play the dialogue, which is the guards condescendingly saying, oh my god, I can't believe you did it, kind of thing. And then it completes a narrative data test, which on the quest comes and marks it as they found it. Then it destroys the gates actor to not keep it continuously triggering if you go in and out. And then with that, it fades to black and then it loads the king's chambers again, all the credits, depending where you're going. And that's pretty much game. These random spheres down here is something not a lot of people have pointed out, but if I start the game, you walk backwards, it will actually tell you to not do that. So you can see if I walk backwards this way,
this isn't the right way.
Then the character says to himself, you shouldn't be going this way. There's some more big spheres around here, so if I hit this one, so because I'm avoiding my job, and then eventually I will pretty much die. There you go. I've died, I'll move to the credit. And that's what these big spheres for, and the damage causing actors here. So it's just a nice little thing that I wanted the person to start outside of the gates. I didn't have time to build all this area up and let them walk out here pretending it's the king's chambers. So I literally just added some things in. If your character starting some dialogue, which is these big sphere ones, saying the king's not going to like this, turn around, blah blah blah, and then you die. That's a nice little effect that nobody saw yet, which is funny. And this one is just how you start talking to these guards here. They're rather condescending guards. A fun little fact, one of the cards I was going to add in here was nice guards, and it was just going to be this guard here, because he's the bad one, Daniel the Dark. He's the one who's always like putting you down. This guy's alright, he's okay. But I was going to add a card that you could add in called nice guards, where he would just give you positive compliments all the time, which I thought would be pretty funny, to be honest. But I ran out of time to be able to do it, because in order to do it, the guards actually have quite a lot of dialogue. So if I go to Gate Knights, there's all the different dialogue I've got to do. So all the green ones are the ones that have to affect, but also each green one has a bunch of alternative lines as well. So I'd have to rethink of all his dialogue and put in a bunch of conditions to make it work. So there's quite a lot there. So at the end, I just ran out of time and I had to abandon that idea. The last thing that I will show you on the game, and if I have missed anything, like I say, please let me know and I'll make another tutorial. I'll dedicate a tutorial to something you need to see. So just a moment ago, I mentioned how I could have 250 NPCs running around this map, and if I enable stat FPS, if I enable the FPS here, you can see I'm rocking at a nice 50, 60, that's what I'm recording. But if I start the game, I'm still holding a solid 30 or 40 FPS with all of the NPCs here. 250 NPCs. If I pause the game and come down here, you can see all the different NPCs here, which are all spawning, and they're all in the game. And the reason I've managed to achieve this, if I break out, you can see all the NPCs are here, but as we get over here, you can see they'll start T-posing and not doing very much. And these are the animations starting to slow down. And eventually you will see that the NPCs will just outright disappear. If I play, you can see, look how laggy they are. These ones are barely moving, no shadows, and eventually some of them will just outright disappear as well when they get far enough. So this is a plugin that Unreal gave out a while ago for free now, but it's absolutely worth it, called the NPC Optimizer. And basically all you do is drop on an optimization prompt. That's it. And then you're done. It will optimize your NPCs to reduce how much usage they have with how far away they are. And you've got a bunch of different settings. So I came in and just tweaked my waves a little, which is basically the same as LODs. Depending on how far away they are, apply the effect. So I've said on the first wave it's 2,500 Unreal units away, second is 3,000, 4,000, and then max viewable distance is 8,000. My map's not 8,000 big, but after 8,000 they'd just be made invisible. And then there's all sorts of different things down here and settings you can come and tweak. And in some cases you can just outright remove the NPCs from the game until the player arrives. And that's how I've managed to do it. In some instances, if you get a good visibility, like if I come down here and look all the way down there, you'll see the NPC stuttering across. That's something very minor that I'm willing to accept, but you could absolutely just play around with it. So the last thing I'm going to show you is a custom card I made called the Big Head mode. Every game has some sort of Big Head mode, which is absolutely fantastic. If I come in and just temporarily enable Big Head mode so I don't have to go through the game, you'll notice that all of NPCs will have big heads. There you go. And it's extremely funny. I absolutely love it. You can see all the skeletons, they'll run towards us, big heads, try to swing, and you can see as you walk around, even the subjects, everyone has big heads. And the benefit of it as well is even the cutscenes have big heads. So if you come to the King's Chambers and run it, everybody in here also have big heads, which looks so funny. And the way I did this was actually really simple, a lot easier than I figured it would be. So in your animation blueprint, if you ever want to do this, you need some way of detecting if big head mode is enabled. So I just did it up here in my event begin. So I just detect, is big head mode enabled? If so, enable big head boolean here. That's it. And then in your anim graph, I have this transform bone thing here. So it takes the default cache pose, which is then playing idle here. Then it adds the default slot so they can play montages. But then it converts it to a local component, which I don't fully know what it does. But it does it, so I can modify it. And then inside this transform modify bone, all I do is get the bone head, say I want to adjust the scale, and then I set the scale to 3 times the size. I convert it back, and then I push it back into this blend poses by bool, which basically says if they've got big head, go to the true pose, which is that one. If it's false, go to the normal one. And that's it. So if I come, he's got a small head, but if I come and tick this big mode here, she now has a big head like so. And it's really just that simple. So all I do is just enable big head. I was going to do small head mode, no head mode as well, but I ran out of time again. So that, ladies and gentlemen, is my game, King's Summoner. So far, like I say, it's got positive reviews, nothing devastating, nobody's raised any major bugs, everybody seems to be having quite fun with it. The only negative comment I've had, not really even negative, is the gameplay loop can get a bit repetitive, which yes, it absolutely can. That's kind of the reason I added the cards, so you change it, but I just need to add more cards, I think. But that is my game. If there is anything you would like to see from it, ladies and gentlemen, please let me know. I'll put some more videos out there. Thank you for watching. My name is Decryption, and I will see you next time.